Tonight, we're diving into a chilling tale from the Appalachian Mountains, where strange disappearances and whispered legends hint at something lurking deep in the woods. This is Whispers in the Woods, the Missing of Black Hollow. The disappearance of the Carter family, March 14, 1982. It started like any other hiking trip. In March of 1982, the Carter family, James, 38, his wife Linda, 34, and their two children, Michael, age 10, and Sarah, age 7, set off for a weekend camping trip in Black Hollow, a remote area of the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Tennessee. They were experienced campers, but when they didn't return home, search teams combed the area. They found only their campsite still intact, tent unzipped, food half-eaten, and the family's belongings untouched. But the Carters were gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just silence. A single Polaroid camera was found near the tent. The last picture on the roll, a blurry, shadowy figure standing between the trees. On March 16, 1982, 2 days after the Carters vanished, an elderly hunter named Gerald Lawson stumbled into a ranger station, shaking with fear. He had been camping just a few miles from Black Hollow and swore he saw something unnatural. "I heard voices," he told rangers. "Not like normal people talking. It was whispered, like they was trying to decide something." He described figures moving in the dark, creeping low to the ground like animals. They weren't wearing no real clothes, just scraps, barefoot. Faces were wrong, too long, too pale, and their eyes black as night. Lawson claimed he heard a child screaming before everything fell silent. By morning, he packed up and left, not daring to stay another night. Authorities launched a week-long search of the Black Hollow area. Helicopters, dogs, and over 50 volunteers scoured the forest. They found Michael's blue jacket hanging from a low tree branch, torn at the sleeves. A child's footprint in the mud, but it wasn't alone. Larger barefoot prints surrounded it, like something had been following. A crude symbol carved into a tree near the family's last known location. It resembled an eye with jagged lines, an old Appalachian warning sign that meant stay away. No bodies. No further signs of the Carters. The case went cold. Black Hollow has long been feared by locals. Older generations tell stories of the Hollow Men, a rumored clan of wild, inbred mountain people who stayed hidden for centuries, attacking travelers who wandered too deep into their land. Some say they snatch people for food. Others believe they steal children to keep their bloodline alive. A few whisper that they're not human at all. Years later, in 1996, a group of hikers ignored the warnings and camped in the same area. That night, they heard low, clicking sounds outside their tents, almost like a language. In the morning, they found a single human tooth embedded in the bark of a tree near their site. They left immediately. The Carter family today, are they still out there? The Carter family was never found. No remains, no leads, no closure. Some say they were taken deep into the mountains, assimilated into the wild clan that lurks beyond civilization. Every few years, a new disappearance occurs in the Black Hollow region. People go in, but they don't come out. And sometimes, just sometimes, hikers report hearing whispers, soft, raspy voices on the wind, right before they realize they're not alone. For years, Black Hollow remained eerily undisturbed. The forest, as if caught in time, had a way of quietly swallowing secrets, protecting its darkness from the outside world. But that fragile peace was shattered in 2019, when a group of young campers vanished without a trace. They had been hiking in the same area where the Carter family had disappeared decades before. Their friends called for help when they didn't return, and after days of searching, the authorities knew they had to send someone in. That someone was Park Ranger Ethan Reynolds, a seasoned officer who had patrolled the surrounding wilderness for years. He was no stranger to lost hikers or stray campers, but this situation felt different. There was a weight to it, a lingering feeling of dread. When Ethan arrived at the campsite, the air was thick, almost too still. The tents lay slashed open, as if something had ripped through them with violent force. But there was no sign of a struggle, no broken equipment, no signs of a rushed departure. Nothing was taken, not even the food that sat half-eaten on the ground. There were no footprints leading away from the camp, only the smooth, undisturbed earth that seemed to mock the very idea of human presence. The forest stood silent, too silent, with only the occasional creaking of the trees above as the wind moved through them. Ethan's unease grew as he searched the area, his flashlight flickering as the shadows deepened around him. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Just off to the side, a tree with fresh carvings, deep gouges in the bark that didn't belong. The marks were too precise, too deliberate. His stomach turned as he stepped closer, the familiar shape of the jagged eye symbol staring back at him. The same symbol found decades ago, etched into the trees near the Carter family's campsite, meant to keep people away. It was unmistakable. Yet beneath it something new was written, freshly carved into the tree as though the words had been scratched there only moments before. We took them too. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His flashlight flickered again, casting strange shadows over the words. The phrase seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as though it had been waiting for him. The silence around him felt oppressive, as if the forest itself had become aware of his presence, closing in. He had seen many unsettling things in his career, but this felt different. This felt like a message, one meant to be found, but one that shouldn't be understood. He stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. Something moved behind him, just out of view. The rustling of leaves. A distant sound that wasn't quite a whisper, but something just as unsettling. The weight of the forest was too much. With his instincts screaming at him, Ethan turned and ran. But as he fled back to his vehicle, he couldn't shake the feeling that deep in the shadows of Black Hollow, something or someone was watching him. Waiting. The whispers of Black Hollow weren't just stories, they were alive. That was the last time anyone camped in Black Hollow. But even today, on cold, windless nights, say you can still hear the whispers. And if you do, run. Truth or legend? So how much of this story is true? The Carter family, that never existed, at least not by that name. But the Appalachian Mountains are filled with real cases of unexplained disappearances, strange symbols, and chilling encounters deep in the wilderness. Gerald Lawson's story? It's eerily similar to accounts from hunters and hikers who claim to have seen people in the woods, moving in ways no human should. The whispers, the strange footprints, the feeling of being watched, all real reports from those who have dared to explore too deep into the mountains. And the most unsettling part? Black Hollow may not be a real place on a map, but the stories, they come from somewhere. So what do you think? Could there really be a hidden group of people, cut off from civilization, living in the mountains? Have hikers simply let their fear and the isolation of the wilderness play tricks on them? Or is there something older lurking in the Appalachian woods, something that doesn't want to be found? Let me know what you believe in the comments. And if you ever find yourself deep in the Appalachian wilderness, miles away from another soul, listen carefully. Because if you hear whispers when no one is around, you might not be as alone as you think. Do you believe in ghosts? Not the kind from stories you tell around a campfire, but the kind that watch from the woods when you're alone. The kind that wait in places long forgotten, old cabins, silent trails, vanishing hikers, whispers in the dark that call you by name. What if it's not just legend? What if you stepped off the trail and never came back? Tonight's story is one of those places where something lingers, hungry, patient, and never truly gone. This is The Haunting of Black Hollow Cabin. She was last seen at the church picnic just before twilight, barefoot, standing at the edge of the woods in a brand-new white dress, the kind stitched with care and meant for special occasions. It was old-fashioned even then, lace-trimmed sleeves with satin ribbons tied at the waist, fluttering like pale streamers in the breeze. Her hair was curled, her cheeks flushed from the summer heat, and though she looked every bit the picture of innocence, there was something far away in her eyes, as if she heard a song no one else could. She didn't say a word when she stepped off the grass and onto the trail that led into Black Hollow, just turned, smiled faintly, and walked between the trees. Some folks followed, calling after her. They found one of her ribbons caught on a branch, and a little farther on, her footprints near a creek. A couple of men who looked for her swore they saw something lurking, half hidden in the shadows, watching. No one is quite certain what happened to her, why she walked into the woods following a voice only she heard. But what's certain is this: she wandered too far, lured by the hush of the trees and the promise of something ancient. When she found the old stone well half buried in moss, she paused, and that's when she saw it, one of the feral ones, hunched and watching, and no one heard her scream. Matt Harris wasn't running from anything in particular, just the noise of everyday life. At 32, the pressure of routine had worn him thin, so he took a vacation, packed a fishing pole, a tent, and a week's worth of peace in the Appalachian wilderness. He chose a narrow trail, mostly forgotten. It twisted deep into the forest, untouched, overgrown, just the way he liked it, quiet and still. The first couple of nights were perfect. Matt set up camp beside a cool mountain creek that wound through the rocks like glass. The water was so clear he could see trout flashing beneath the surface. He spent the afternoon casting lines, the rhythmic motion calming, meditative. The trees whispered overhead, and the sunlight filtered through the branches in golden slivers. At night, he cooked his catch over the fire and listened to the forest settle around him. The distant hoot of an owl, the crackle of pine cones in the flames. Peace, real peace, was rare, and out here he'd found it. On the morning of the third day, he packed up and followed a deer trail deeper into the woods. The forest here was older, denser. The path grew narrow and uneven, the trees crowding in like silent sentinels. That's when he saw it. A tree just off the trail. An old one, wide and scarred, its bark thick and cracked. Something had been carved into it, and roughly etched, deep and crude, like it had been gouged in with a hunting knife. And beneath it, in jagged letters, "We took them too." The moment he read it, the air shifted. Cold slid down the back of his neck like ice water under his collar. The forest, once alive with birdsong and the rustling of leaves, had gone dead silent. No birds, no breeze, just the groan of that ancient tree. He stared at the carving a moment longer, a knot tightening in his gut. It felt wrong. Familiar in a way that made his skin crawl like something half-remembered from a bad dream. Then, in the corner of his eye, movement. Between the trees, maybe 20 feet off the trail, something drifted through the fog that had begun to creep between the trunks. A figure, thin, dressed in white, gliding more than walking. It moved from one tree to another, vanishing behind the bark, only to reappear a moment later, closer. Matt blinked, squinted. Gone. The fog thickened. The chill deepened, not just on his skin, but in his bones, like the cold had seeped into the marrow. He took a step back from the tree, from the eye. He didn't know why, but something inside him whispered, "Leave. Now." He should have listened. He should have turned back then and there. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he took one last look at the carving, one last glance into that wide, watching eye, slung his pack over his shoulder, and moved on, faster now. He didn't notice how the light had dimmed behind the clouds, or how the trees leaned just a little closer than before. He only knew he didn't want to see that figure again. And not long after, the sky began to turn. Clouds rolled in fast and low, the kind that swallowed the sun and flattened sound. The rain hit hard, cold, relentless. Matt tried to hike out, but the trail had turned to mud, and the trees pressed closer with every step. That's when he saw it. An old cabin, half hidden behind a curtain of pine. A candle flickered in the front window, a soft golden glow behind foggy glass. It shouldn't have been there, but it was. Matt approached slowly. The wood groaned beneath the porch. He knocked. The door creaked open. A young woman stood in the doorway, pale, almost translucent. Her long black hair hung wet against a white older-in-style plain with bits of ribbon and lace. Her eyes were dark, deep, unblinking. Without a word, she stepped aside, and Matt entered. The cabin was warm, too warm. A fire burned in the hearth, steady and silent. The table was already set, fresh bread, a steaming stew, and a glass of red wine. It smelled comforting, like home. He asked if she had a phone or any way to call for help. She shook her head. No electricity, no phone out here, but my friends are coming soon. They'll take you back with them. Her voice was soft, calm. Something in it scratched at the edge of his instincts. Matt ate. She did not. He asked her name. She only smiled. When the meal was over, she led him down a short hallway to a small bedroom. The bed looked freshly made. The quilt was heavy and handmade. You should rest, she said. They'll be here soon. Then she left without closing the door. That night, he dreamed. He lay in the same bed, but the window had no glass, just open space, and outside, figures stared in, dozens of them, gaunt, feral-looking people with matted hair and blank, hungry eyes. They didn't speak, they didn't blink, they just watched. She was in the room with him, standing by the bed, staring down at him. Then the dream shifted. He stood at the edge of a deep, black pit, a well. At the bottom, he saw her, broken, dead, her limbs twisted, her white dress soaked in blood and rain. And yet she looked up and smiled, but her face was gone. A skull stared back. Matt woke with a gasp. The cabin was silent. The candle had burned down to a nub. The fire had gone cold. It was past noon. He stepped out of the bedroom and stopped. The cabin was no longer warm. It was abandoned. Dust clung to every surface. Cobwebs spread like veins along the ceiling. The table lay overturned. The food rotted. The air reeked of mold and damp wood. Matt staggered outside. In the daylight, the truth was plain. The cabin was a ruin. The roof sagged. Shingles hung like broken teeth. Moss blanketed the steps. It hadn't been lived in for years, maybe decades. But he remembered the warmth, the food, the woman. A dream? A hallucination? Then he saw it, behind the cabin, hidden beneath vines and decay, an old stone well. He moved toward it, slowly, pulled by something ancient and cold. He looked down, bones, scraps of white fabric tangled in the remains. Then he heard his name, a whisper, soft and near. He turned. She stood there looking down into the well. Not alive, not anymore. Her skin was stretched too tight, her dress torn and gray with age, and her eyes, still dark, still deep, were empty. My friends are here now, she said. From the shadows behind her they came, the feral ones, the watchers. The woods were silent and shadows stretched around him, yet he heard their voices in his head. Slowly he backed away. His foot slipped. As he fell, the well swallowed him, then darkness closed like a mouth. I told you they would come. Her voice a whisper in the shadows that surrounded him, low, soft, certain. He looked up. Faces peered down at him, haunted, hungry. In an instant her dead, cold face changed for a moment to the quiet and kind girl he had seen the night before. He raised his hand in a plea. Yes, they will come, but they will never let you leave. And as the lid slid shut above him, her soft laughter followed. The old man sat in the corner booth of the diner, the paper folded in front of him. The headline caught his eye. Hiker missing in Black Hollow, another mystery or something worse. The reporter's words didn't surprise him. they never did anymore. The link between the disappearance of Matt Harris and the young woman who'd vanished years ago was too familiar. The reporter had even speculated about a possible connection to something else in the woods, the same thing he'd once believed. The ranger's fingers tightened around his coffee mug, the steam rising like a faint wisp of something not quite right. He'd seen this before when he had been sent in to investigate the same place, all those years ago. The same hollow, the same haunting silence, the same tree with the carved eye staring back at him as it always had. He shuddered, remembering the creature in the woods, its shape barely visible through the fog, its presence something no animal could create. It was something older, something patient, and it still waited. He looked out the diner window, the chill of the morning creeping through the glass. He knew one thing for certain now. Some things in the woods weren't meant to be found. And some things didn't let you leave. Truth or legend? Some say the world is full of thin places, where the veil between the living and the dead wears down to almost nothing. And sometimes something not meant to belong in this world slips through. Legends and truth are often hard to separate, because every legend begins somewhere. Every myth has a beginning, and every whispered tale is born from something. Tonight, we're diving into the chilling legend of the Wendigo, which has haunted the forests of North America for centuries. A spirit of hunger, of madness, and of something far worse. Those who have seen it never live to tell the tale, or if they do, they are never the same again. Tonight, we bring you Horror in the Woods, The Curse of the Wendigo. A collection of eerie encounters that may make you think twice before stepping too deep into the woods. The Wendigo is one of the most terrifying creatures in North American folklore, its origins deeply rooted in Algonquian Native American mythology. Whispers of this dreaded being have echoed through the tribes of the Great Lakes, the dense forests of Canada, and the vast wilderness of Minnesota for centuries. But the Wendigo is more than just a monster. It is a curse. A spirit of insatiable hunger born when a person succumbs to the ultimate taboo, cannibalism. Towering and gaunt, the Wendigo's skeletal frame appears stretched by its endless starvation. Its pale, frost-bitten skin clings tightly to its bones, and its hollow eyes burn with an eerie, otherworldly glow. But its most haunting feature is the twisted antlers that rise from its head, gnarled and jagged, like the branches of a cursed tree casting long, unnatural shadows in the moonlight. It moves with an unnatural grace, its presence bringing a chilling stillness to the air. Hidden deep within the forests, it lurks, watching, waiting, whispering in voices not its own. And when its hunger becomes unbearable, it hunts. Some say the Wendigo is nothing more than myth, but the following encounters may tell a different story. It was the winter of 1896. Elias Thatcher, a fur trapper, set up camp near Lake of the Woods in northern Minnesota. The snow was deep that year, and food was scarce. Elias had to stretch his food supplies. That day he had caught a couple of rabbits, and they were stewing in a pot hung over the fire in the fireplace. The blizzard raged outside, snow making its way through the cracks in his cabin. Firelight flickered. He was eating when he heard scratching at the door. A low, raspy voice called out, "Help me, please." Elias hesitated. No one should be out in a storm like this. He opened the door slightly, but there was nothing, just the howling wind and the skeletal branches of the trees. He thought he saw a thin shadow moving in the trees. That night, he barely slept. The scratching came again, now at the windows. Through the window he saw a figure. It was tall, too tall. Its arms hung long and unnatural, its ribs pressing against gray, decayed flesh. Its eyes burned like embers in hollow sockets, flickering with an eerie light. A massive rack of antlers, twisted and gnarled like those of an ancient buck, crowned its head. And its mouth, lipless, frozen in a grotesque grin, revealing rows of jagged, needle-sharp teeth. Elias grabbed his rifle, but the thing was gone. He remembered the creature's mouth for the rest of his life. He stayed awake the rest of the night. The next morning, the blizzard had died down when he ventured out his door. It was then that he noticed the tracks in the snow, large, too large for a man. They circled his cabin in an unnatural, looping pattern. He followed the tracks, but they led to nowhere. They seemed to vanish into the deep, white snow. Elias didn't see the creature again, but sometimes at night he would hear an unearthly scream. Spring came a few weeks later. He packed up his furs and his belongings. Elias never spent another winter in those woods. Not long after, he married a woman named Martha and moved to Billings, Montana, drawn by the promise of the fur and gold trade. There, he opened a trading post and became a respected member of the community. For years, he kept his secret buried. It wasn't until he was an old man that he finally told his wife and son the story of that fateful winter. The disappearance of Adam Keller. In the summer of 1995, 4 friends, Adam Keller, his younger brother Jake, and a married couple, Brian and Lisa Sanford, set out on a hiking trip deep in Ontario, Canada's vast boreal forests. On the third night, after hours spent laughing around the campfire, they turned in early, eager for an early start the next morning. But when dawn arrived, Adam's sleeping bag was empty. His boots were still there. His flashlight lay outside the tent, its beam flickering weakly. They searched the entire day, calling his name, scouring the forest, but there were no footprints, no broken branches, no sign Adam had ever left the tent. That night, as they sat by the fire, exhaustion and fear settling in, they called out for him again, his name echoing into the trees. And then, something called back. Not Adam, not human. A voice, rasping, broken, distorted. Jake, Brian, help me. Please, I'm so cold. It sounded like Adam, but it wasn't. The voice was too low, too hollow, too wrong. Jake grabbed his flashlight, hands shaking, and aimed it toward the trees. That's when they saw it. A figure just beyond the firelight, horribly thin. Its limbs bent at unnatural angles, a rack of twisted antlers rising from its head. Its mouth, lipless, stretched into a frozen, jagged grin, and its eyes, burning, watching. Lisa screamed. The thing moved. Jake snatched a burning log from the fire and hurled it, sparks bursting into the air. The figure was gone. By dawn they ran, left everything behind. When they reached the nearest ranger station, they reported Adam's disappearance. A search team combed the area for days. They never found him, but the dogs did find shreds of his clothing. His jacket, torn to pieces, covered in blood. The official report said animal attack, but Jake, Brian, and Lisa never spoke about what they really saw. Somewhere, deep in that forest, something else had been watching. Somewhere, deep in that forest, something unnatural still lingers, waiting. One of the most disturbing encounters is the disappearance of a survival guide and YouTube creator that was caught on video. In 2022, a survivalist named Eric Nolan vanished while documenting his solo expedition into the Montana wilderness. His YouTube recordings found weeks later began as expected, fishing, setting traps, talking to the camera with excitement. But on day 6, his tone changed. In the dim glow of his cabin lantern, he whispered to the camera, "Something's outside my cabin. I don't know what, but I think it's watching me." The next few days, his videos grew strange. His eyes looked hollow. His voice wavered. Paranoia crept in. By day 9, his final recording, Eric was no longer the same man. His face was drawn, terrified. "I can't eat. I haven't slept in days. I want to leave, but I'm afraid to hike out of here." He fell silent, listening. Then, barely above a breath, he whispered, "Something's outside my cabin. I don't know what it is, but it's watching me." And then a face appeared in the window behind him. Sunken, hollow, staring, Eric's breathing hitched, His hand clamped over his mouth. He didn't move, didn't even blink. Then a sound, not a knock, not a scratch, a whisper, right next to the camera. "You smell like hunger." The screen glitched. But the final footage showed Eric grabbing his rifle, throwing open the door, then running. His abandoned cabin was found weeks later. Eric Nolan was never seen again. Are these stories just legends? Elias, Adam, Eric, none of them ever existed. These stories aren't real, but the legend of the Wendigo, that is very real. Legends and truth are often hard to separate because every legend begins somewhere with something. Every myth has a beginning. Every whispered tale is born from something. For centuries, the Algonquian tribes have spoken of a creature lurking in the deep woods, a predator of hunger, a curse of the unforgiven. And even now, hikers and hunters still speak of shadows that move when they shouldn't, eyes that burn in the darkness, voices that don't belong. So we have to wonder, why do the stories always describe it the same way? If it's nothing more than a legend, why do people still claim to see it? And if you ever hear your name carried on the wind in a voice that sounds almost familiar, will you turn around? The swamps have always been shrouded in mystery and fear. Some say the fog conceals secrets older than the trees, and in the black waters beneath the cypress, something lurks, waiting. Tonight, we bring you Blood Bayou, Disturbing Encounters with the Rougarou, a collection of 3 stories of those who met the beast and barely lived to tell of it. They say Louisiana swamps hold many secrets, but none more feared than the Rougarou, a cursed being that walks the line between man and beast, hunting beneath the cover of darkness. Born from a wicked affliction, it spreads its curse like a disease, leaving those who cross its path forever marked. With glowing red eyes, razor-sharp claws, and an intelligence far beyond any mere animal, the Rougarou is more than just a legend. It's a predator lurking in the mist, waiting for its next victim. Harlan Thibodeau had lived and hunted in the swamps of Louisiana all his life. He knew the bends of the bayou, the places where gators hid, and the trails where deer passed through the thick mist. It was the fall of 1954 when he first found the tracks by the water's edge. Too big for a wolf, too long for a man. Clawed, they sunk deep into the wet earth as if something heavy had passed through. His blood ran cold. He gripped his rifle and pressed on, following the tracks. It was twilight, and the fog had begun to thicken, curling between the cypress trees. The silence was wrong. No insects, no frogs, not even the distant splash of a fish. Then came the growl. Low, rattling, close. The sound stopped Harlan in his tracks, a noise he had heard whispered about his whole life. Rougarou. A wild hog squealed in terror, then silence, followed by a long, guttural howl that sent ice through his veins. Stumbling through the muck, he reached his pirogue and shoved off. The motor sputtered, refusing to start. His hands trembled as he yanked the cord again and again, until finally the engine roared to life and his boat shot forward across the dark waters of the swamp, just as something massive crashed through the brush, closing in fast. Harlan risked a glance back. Eyes burned like embers in the fog. The creature stood at the water's edge, watching, waiting. Then, slowly, it grinned and wiped the blood from its mouth. As it turned and disappeared into the swamp, its deep-clawed tracks in the mud began to change, until only the footprints of a man remained. It was several months before Harlan ventured into the swamp again. Even then, he did so reluctantly. The memory of that night still clung to him. The howl, the burning eyes, the way the thing watched him. He told himself it had to be a trick of the mist, a fever dream born from too many late nights and too many ghost stories. But deep down, he knew better. The swamp was different now, too quiet. No chorus of frogs, no rustling of critters in the underbrush, just the gentle lap of water against the cypress roots. The stillness gnawed at him. As he stepped carefully through the muddy trail, his rifle slung across his back, something cracked in the distance. A branch snapping, Harlan froze. Another sound, low, guttural breathing, close. His heart pounded as he turned, the weight of his rifle suddenly useless in his hands. Something massive exploded from the shadows. A towering figure, standing on two legs, its matted fur slick with swamp water, eyes glowing like dying coals. The Rougarou. Harlan fired. The bullet struck, he was sure of it, but the creature barely flinched. Then it lunged. Pain tore through his shoulder as claws ripped flesh, and he crashed into the cold mud. He covered his face, bracing for death, but nothing came. The creature was gone. Heart hammering, Harlan scrambled to his feet, searching desperately for his gun. Then he heard it, the low, guttural growl, close, taunting, delighting in his fear. "Run!" The word pounded in his skull, and he did. Stumbling through the muck, he reached his pirogue. Harlan made it back to town, bloodied and shaking. He never hunted the deep swamp again. Some nights, he swore he heard it outside his cabin, breathing, waiting, and sometimes he saw its tracks. On a hot, humid summer night in 1986, a man named Beau Landry had his first encounter with the Rougarou on a bayou deep in the Louisiana swamps. It wouldn't be his last. Beau had spent his life in the waters, knew their rhythms like the back of his hand. The croak of bullfrogs, the hum of cicadas, the occasional splash of a gator slipping below the surface. But tonight something was off. At first he thought it was a gator, low, moving slow. The bayou was different that night. The air was thick, still. Even the usual night sounds felt distant, like they were pulling away from him. He sat in his boat, lantern flickering, checking his lines when he heard it. A low scrape against the cypress. Not the wind, not an animal, something deliberate. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the dark. Nothing but mist and moonlight on the water. But he felt it, that prickling sensation at the base of his neck. The certainty that something out there, something unseen, was watching. Beau tightened his grip on his rifle, forcing himself to breathe. He wasn't the kind to spook easy. The swamp had its fair share of strange things, but he'd always been able to explain them. This, though? There was no explanation. Minutes passed, the silence stretched, and then, just when he thought he might have imagined it, splash! Not small, not a fish. Something big moving just beyond the fog. Beau didn't wait to find out what. He fired up the motor and took off, the feeling of unseen eyes burning into his back the whole way home. He never spoke of it. His gut told him to leave it alone. A week later, it came looking for him. Beau was out hunting gators when he heard it, a guttural growl. Low. Wrong. Through the mist and cypress, something moved. A figure, half hidden, its shape all wrong, too thin in places, too thick in others. But the eyes, those burning red eyes locked onto him. Beau's blood turned to ice. He revved his boat motor, backing away fast, but the thing moved with him, loping through the shallow water, too fast, too smooth. Then it stopped. For a moment the swamp fell silent. Even the insects had gone still. The creature cocked its head, watching him, testing him. Then slowly it lifted one arm and pointed. Not at him, but past him toward the open water. Beau swallowed hard. The air felt heavier, thick like a storm was pressing in. He reached for his shotgun. Then the thing grinned. A mouth too wide, teeth too long. Beau fired. The blast tore through the fog, and for a moment the thing staggered. Then it laughed, a sound that didn't belong in this world. Beau gunned the motor, tearing through the bayou, not stopping until he reached the dock by the house he shared with his brother Waylon. He jumped out, leaving the boat drifting, too shaken to care. The next morning, he told his brother Waylon about the encounter. Together, they walked down to the dock. The boat was tied up. Beau knew he hadn't done it. In the mud, leading from the water, were footprints, massive and clawed. On the dock, beside the boat, were another set of prints. Human, barefoot, and carved deep into the wood, a single word, run. Bo stared at the word carved into the dock. His gut twisted. Waylon exhaled, eyes dark. Without another word, he started walking, not toward the boat, but into the trees. Bo hesitated, unease creeping in. "Where you goin'?" Bo called. Waylon didn't stop, so Bo followed. The swamp swallowed them, thick with shadows and silence. Then Waylon stopped. Slowly he turned, and Bo saw his eyes burning, red. Cold fear slammed through him. "No," Waylon grinned, the same bloody grin from the night before. "Tried to warn you," he said softly. Bo's breath hitched. The footprints, the laughter, the way it never attacked, it all made sense. Waylon shuddered, his skin rippling, bones stretching, changing. Bo didn't wait to see the rest. He ran, but he never made it out of the swamp that day. In the summer of 2002, Celeste Robichaud inherited her grandfather's small house on a bayou in southern Louisiana. She had been raised there, but left the day she turned 18. Most of her family was gone. She hadn't spoken to her older brother in years. All families have their problems. Some just run deeper than others. Newly divorced and desperate for a fresh start, she made the decision to leave Little Rock, Arkansas, and return to her roots. The next few months were quiet, almost soothing. Celeste spent her days remodeling the house, the steady rhythm of work keeping her mind occupied. At night, she fell asleep to the familiar sounds of water lapping against the dock, a sound that had once been comforting. But as time passed, the silence between those sounds began to feel heavier. The rustling of the cypress trees in the wind carried an edge of something familiar, distant, unsettling. Then came the scratching. And with it, memories she had long buried began to stir. It started small, a faint scritch against her door. Raccoons, she thought, maybe a stray dog. But then she saw the shadows, long hunched, moving unnaturally, and just as quickly they were gone. That night Celeste rummaged through the old chest that had belonged to her grandpa. Shaky hands found the small worn box. Inside, silver gleamed in the dim lamplight. Her heart thumped loudly as her gaze settled on the hunting rifle above the fireplace. A few nights later, she heard the scratching again, this time on the deck. A sniff, a low growl. She crept to the window and saw the eyes, too high for a man, too red. They didn't blink, just stared back before vanishing into the dark. Celeste locked every door and window, but the scratching came again, louder this time, claws scraping against wood. Then the handle rattled. Heart pounding, she grabbed the rifle and opened the small box. Taking out a silver bullet, she slid it into the chamber. She aimed the barrel at the door. Silence. Then came a slow, deep growl that vibrated through the walls. She backed away, her aim steady. The boards on the porch creaked under something heavy. Then the beast slammed against the door, hard enough to rattle the windows. Celeste screamed, firing through the door. A snarl erupted from the other side, then silence as the silver found its mark. Celeste slid slowly to the floor, shaken, weary. Placing the gun on the floor beside her, she leaned back against the seat of a chair and exhaled slowly. She stayed awake until dawn. When she finally stepped outside, her porch was shredded, deep claw marks gouging the wood. A blood trail led off into the woods, disappearing into the bayou. Celeste raised a trembling hand to wipe the tears from her face. "I did what I had to do, brother," she whispered. "I hope you've found peace now, Waylon." She packed what she could and left that day, never looked back. The house, it still stands empty, and deep in the bayou are bones of a man who finally found peace. Truth or legend? The people in these stories aren't real, but the legend of the Rougarou, that is very real. Legends and truth are often hard to separate because every legend begins somewhere with something. Every myth has a beginning. Every whispered tale is born from something. Some say the Rougarou is just a story, a way to keep kids from wandering too deep into the bayou. But those who have seen it know better. It's still out there, watching, waiting, and if you hear the scratching at your door or see the red eyes in the water, you'd best run. The story you're about to hear takes place in the early 1900s, a time of intrigue and mystery in the heart of New Orleans, Louisiana. It's the tale of a killer who slipped through the shadows, haunting the city's streets and leaving behind a trail of terror. This is the story of the Jazzman of New Orleans, a name that still chills the bones of those who know it. In the spring of 1918, a brutal crime spree began that would paralyze the city with fear. At night, in the still of the dark, the Jazzman would strike, leaving bloodshed and horror in his wake. The killer's weapon of choice was a simple axe, but his signature left an unsettling mark on New Orleans residents. The first of these terrifying murders occurred on May 23, 1918, when a couple named Joseph and Catherine Maggio were found hacked to death in their home, their skulls crushed and their bodies mutilated. But it didn't stop there. Over the following months, more families fell victim to the Jazzman. Each attack became more brazen, with no clear pattern, yet one thing remained the same: the killer's chilling methods. No one knew who the Jazzman was or what drove him, but one thing was clear: he had turned New Orleans into his personal hunting ground. As the victims' families mourned and the city grew more fearful, a letter arrived, one that would add another layer of mystery to the enigma of the Jazzman. Who was behind these horrific acts? Was it madness, revenge, or something more sinister at play? The nightmare began on the evening of May 23, 1918. Joseph and Catherine Maggio, an Italian-American couple living in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, were quietly going about their evening, unaware that death was watching from the shadows. Their home, located above their small grocery store, was supposed to be a place of comfort, but that night it became a scene of unspeakable horror. As the clock struck midnight, the Jazzman, unseen and unheard, slipped into their home. He wielded a heavy axe, using it to smash through their skulls with brutal force. The couple was found the next morning by relatives, their bodies left in a gruesome display. The police arrived quickly, but there were few clues. The weapon, a bloodied axe, had been left behind, as if to taunt investigators. A razor, later traced to a local barber, was also found at the scene. Yet no fingerprints, no footprints, nothing led to the identity of the monster who had done this. There was no sign of a struggle. The door to their home had been left unlocked and their belongings undisturbed. It was as if the killer had simply walked in, familiar, almost as if he knew his victims. What made this case so strange was the lack of clear motive. There was no robbery, no forced entry, just the savage killings of two innocent people. Police could find no clue to lead them to the identity of the killer, and it appeared the Jazzman had vanished as quickly as he arrived. In the following weeks, fear began to grip New Orleans like a tightening vice. The city had just experienced its first murder by the Jazzman, but it would not be the last. The killer had shown no remorse, and his violence was only just beginning. Over the next few months, similar murders would follow, each one chillingly similar to the last. It was as though the killer had a method, a macabre ritual he was following. Each crime involved a couple. Victims were almost always Italian grocers. Each scene featured the same horrifying weapon, an axe. In some cases, the Jazzman would also leave behind a telltale mark, an open window. The killer seemed to prefer entering his victims' homes through unlocked doors or windows, always sneaking in when they least expected it. On June 27, 1918, another Italian grocer, Louis Bassumer, and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, were found clinging to life in their shop. Their skulls had been fractured by an axe, yet somehow they survived. Harriet, however, would later succumb to her injuries, and in her final moments, she claimed Bassumer himself was the attacker. The police, desperate for answers, arrested him, but the killings continued, proving he was not the Jazzman. By July, the Jazzman's spree had claimed several more victims, including the brutal murders of a family, the Andre family, and the more infamous attack on the Cortimiglia family. In each case, the violence was swift, merciless, and mysterious. No one knew how he chose his victims, and the fear only grew. As the months passed, the fear intensified. By August, another attack shook the city. Anna Schneider, a pregnant woman, was found brutally wounded in her bedroom, her face smashed beyond recognition. Miraculously, she survived and even gave birth to a healthy child weeks later. But still, the Axemen remained free, an unstoppable force that terrorized the city. By 1919, the terror reached its peak. More families were slaughtered. The randomness of the killings left no one feeling safe. Was he a madman, a spirit, a killer hiding in plain sight? No one knew. But soon, the Axeman himself would speak, sending a message that would forever haunt the streets of New Orleans. In the midst of the terror, a mysterious letter appeared that would send a shiver down the spines of everyone in New Orleans. The letter, which was sent to the New Orleans Times-Picayune newspaper on March 13, 1919, contained a chilling message. It was written by the Axeman himself, and in it, he revealed his next plan, to kill again. The letter read in part, "I am very fond of jazz music. I swear to God that I will pass over New Orleans if a jazz band plays at least one song in any given bar. The night will be the night of my last attack if you heed my demand." This bizarre demand led to a wave of uncertainty throughout the city. Bars and clubs responded by playing jazz music, hoping to appease the killer. For a time, there was a brief sense of calm, but it wouldn't last long. Despite the music, the killings resumed. It was as if the Axeman was taunting the city, mocking their fear. Despite the ominous letter, the Axeman's reign of terror eventually came to an end, though no one knows exactly why. After a final attack in October 1919, the killings suddenly stopped. The city was left in confusion, and the killer seemed to vanish without a trace. Theories abound as to why the Axeman stopped. Some believe that he was killed or imprisoned, while others think he simply grew tired of his murderous spree. What is certain is that the killer was never caught, and the mystery remains unsolved to this day. The city of New Orleans slowly returned to normal, but the memory of the Axeman lingered in the minds of those who lived through it. To this day, the identity of the Axeman remains one of New Orleans' most infamous mysteries. Many theories have been proposed about who he might have been. Some suggest that he was a serial killer, a lone man driven by madness or vengeance. Others believe the killings were the work of a group of people, or perhaps even a copycat killer inspired by earlier murders. One popular theory points to a man named James S. DeWitt, a New Orleans resident with a troubled past. However, there is no concrete evidence linking him to the crimes, and many of the theories remain speculative at best. Despite the lack of closure, the Axeman's legacy has endured. He remains one of the most terrifying figures in the city's history, and his story continues to fascinate and horrify those who are brave enough to delve into the dark heart of New Orleans. Although the murders stopped more than a century ago, the legend of the Axeman still echoes through New Orleans. His terror left a permanent mark on the city, and his story has been passed down through the generations. Today, the tale of the Axeman is still told, both as a cautionary tale and as a piece of history that continues to captivate. Was the Axeman a man driven by madness? A ghostly figure who walked the streets of New Orleans in the dead of night? Or perhaps he was something far darker than any of us could imagine, a mystery that remains, a question unanswered. One thing is certain, the Axeman of New Orleans will never be forgotten. They say when the Bone Reaper walks, the living tremble, his axe thirsts for souls, and the night is his to claim. Once he was the Axeman of New Orleans, a man whose crimes painted the streets red, but vengeance is a cruel mistress, and a voodoo curse bound him to the darkness forever. Now a hollow specter of bone and rage, he hunts beneath the moon, searching for those who stray too far into the night. Tonight, our story is one that lingers in the damp air of New Orleans, carried in whispers through the streets when the fog rolls in thick. A story of a man who became something far worse than a murderer, something cursed to walk the night forever. It began in the 1920s, when jazz was king and the city pulsed with life. In the heart of the French Quarter lived a man named Silas Leroux, a bitter, angry soul who believed the world had cheated him. He drank too much, gambled even more, and when he lost, which was often, he took his rage out on those who had nothing to do with his misfortune. It was a dark, foggy night when Silas made his way through the bayou to the home of Mama Celeste, a voodoo priestess both revered and feared throughout the city. His axe, still slick with the blood of his last victim, gleamed under the pale moonlight. The metallic scent clung to him, mixing with the damp, heavy air. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of what was to come. He sought power, wealth, a name that would echo through the streets of New Orleans long after he was dead and buried. The moment he stepped into her candlelit room, she was waiting. The air was thick with the scent of strange herbs, laced with something ancient and knowing. Shadows flickered against the walls, stretching and shifting as if listening. Mama Celeste's dark eyes bore into him, unflinching. "I have seen you in my bones, Silas Leroux, and I have seen your desires. Be careful what you ask for I have seen your future. I will grant only one." Silas scoffed, dragging the edge of his sleeve across his axe blade, smearing blood into the fabric. His lips curled into a grin. "Then give me fame." He knew that with fame came power, and with power came wealth. Mama Celeste did not smile. She did not waver. "I will grant your wish, Silas Leroux." Her voice was a whisper, yet it rumbled through the room. "Wealth you will never have, but the city will tremble at the mention of your name." The smile faltered on his lips. For the first time, something cold prickled his heart, sharp like a heated blade. His fingers curled tighter around the axe, and a tremor ran through him. Mama Celeste's lips moved in a language not meant for mortal tongues. The candle flames twisted unnaturally, their light casting long, writhing shadows. A wind howled through the closed windows. The walls groaned. A searing pain tore through Silas's chest. He fell to his knees with a strangled gasp, clutching at his heart as if he could hold it together. His breath came in ragged, desperate gulps. The room pulsed, bending, warping, reality itself shifting around him. His flesh shrank, blackened and peeled away. His bones gleamed under the flickering candlelight, stripped of everything that made him human. His hands curled around his weapon, now fused to him, as though it had always been a part of his very being. "You thirst for blood, so blood shall bind you," Mama Celeste whispered. "You shall walk these streets when the sun sets, seeking what you cannot find. But when the jazz plays, you will remember, and you will know regret. The city will know your name, Bone Reaper." Silas staggered to his feet. No longer a man, but a hollow thing, his skeletal fingers gripping an axe that had become an extension of his cursed soul. As he staggered into the darkness, Mama Celeste's laugh echoed through the swamp. New Orleans, 1927. The night was thick with humidity, and the distant glow of a street lamp made the fog shimmer with an unearthly hue. The scent of rain clung to the air as Henry Duval stumbled through a narrow alley off Bourbon Street. The lingering echoes of jazz from the club where he worked still thrummed in his ears, but now, in the silence between the buildings, there was only the sound of his own breath and the scrape of something dragging against brick, a quiet, distant shuffle of feet. Henry froze and glanced over his shoulder. The alley was empty, wasn't it? The gaslight above flickered. The shadows stretched unnaturally long. Then came the sound again, a slow, deliberate scrape, 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 metal against stone. His heart pounded as he turned, and there, At the mouth of the alley stood a figure cloaked in darkness. The glow of the gaslight caught on something gleaming in its bony grip. An axe. Henry didn't wait to see more. He turned and ran, feet slapping against the wet pavement, breath hitching as he reached the next street. But he couldn't outrun the sound, the relentless scrape of metal on cobblestone. Suddenly the doors of a jazz club swung open, spilling music into the night. And just like that, the scraping stopped. A laugh floated through the fog, low and chilling. Barely breathing, Henry dared to glance over his shoulder. The alley was empty once more. No laughter, no scraping, just the music, its slow, haunting notes filling his chest with dread. He had heard the stories, the phantom that locals called the Bone Reaper, who walked the streets of New Orleans on nights when moonlight pierced the fog. Henry turned and ran. The mist closed around him, swirling, twisting, disorienting. His foot caught on uneven stone and he stumbled, crashing onto the cobblestones beneath a flickering street lamp. Cold dampness seeped through his clothes. Laughter echoed in his ears, the scrape of metal on stone. The last thing he saw was the figure towering above him, hollow eyes staring down at him, and the blade of an axe gripped in a skeletal hand. By morning, a grocer found his body sprawled on the steps of his store. The flickering light above cast eerie shadows over the scene. Henry's chest cleaved open, his blood pooling into the cracks of the cobblestone pavement. St. Louis Cemetery, November 1st, 1986. New Orleans. Claire LeBeau had never believed in ghost stories. Growing up, she had heard whispers of the Bone Reaper haunting St. Louis Cemetery. Only once did she dare sneak inside its gate. In the dim moonlight, she felt as though she were being watched. Then came a whisper in the dark, "I see you." She ran. For years she chased tales of superstition and the paranormal, eager to expose myths for what they were. She needed to disprove the nightmares of the Bone Reaper that had haunted her dreams. Tonight, she had returned to the cemetery to investigate recent sightings of the Bone Reaper. The metal gate creaked loudly as she pushed it open and stepped inside and took her first step. Her notepad was clutched tightly in one hand. Her small Instamatic camera hung from its strap around her neck. The moon hung low, silver light casting jagged shadows over the mausoleums. Claire stepped carefully over the cracked pathway that wound through the cemetery like a maze. The ancient tombs stood hauntingly beautiful in the darkness. The gravestone statues seemed to move and shift in an unearthly manner. A winged shadow loomed before her. She caught her breath, her pulse hammering in her ears. The clouds shifted, and moonlight spilled over the carved figure of an angel marking a grave. Claire exhaled slowly. Then, the air shifted. The warmth of the night bled away, replaced by a sudden bone-deep chill. Fog curled through the cemetery, thick and suffocating. A rustling came from behind a grave, something, or someone, moving in the darkness. Claire swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her ears as she strained to listen for movement. Silence. Then, a low creak, a scraping sound, metallic, echoing off the broken stone. Her flashlight flickered as she turned toward the source. The old, rusted gate was swinging open. Beyond it stood a figure, tall, dark, hollow eyes glowing like embers. A tattered suit clung to its skeletal frame, a dark hat obscuring its face, and in its grip an axe, catching the moonlight like the gleam of a wolf's eye. Claire's breath hitched. She stepped backward, her heart beat a thunderous drum in her chest. She slowly lifted her camera. She didn't dare look through the viewfinder, just pointed and clicked. The camera whirred, and the instant photo dropped at her feet. Then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a trumpet drifted from the quarter, a slow, mournful jazz melody floating over the tombs. The figure twitched. A shudder passed through its bony form, and then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, vanished into the shadows. Claire fled. The next day, despite every instinct screaming at her to stay away, she returned. When she found the photo, it was resting on the granite base beside the angel's feet. With trembling fingers, she reached for it, then jerked her hand back. A face of bone grinned back at her, and scrawled in blood across the photo were the words, "I see you." Mardi Gras, the Roosevelt Hotel. 15 years later, the hotel room door clicked shut, sealing out the distant echoes of Mardi Gras revelry. The night had been a blur of music, masks, and mystery, and now she stood in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, watching the stranger who had danced with her through the night. His dark coat hung on his tall frame, his hat casting a shadow over his sharp features. "You never did tell me your name," she said, kicking off her heels. The man, tall, elegant in his dark coat and hat, tilted his head slightly. "You already know it." Her smile faltered. Something about his voice. It was the sound of rust scraping metal, of wind moaning through tombs. The room turned cold. Too cold. The music in the streets outside blocked out by the sound of her own heartbeat. For a moment she stopped breathing. A metallic scent curled into the air. His voice was a rasp of wind through dead branches when he whispered her name. He lifted his hand and she saw the axe, rusted and pitted, fused to the bones of his hand. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as he slowly raised his head. In the dim light, his hollow sockets burned with an unnatural glow. She heard his slow hiss of breath. Fear turned to sheer terror when he spoke. "I see you." The whisper slithered through the room as the lights flickered, then died. Her scream never left her lips. Are these stories about the Bone Reaper truth or legend? What do you think? Maybe the Bone Reaper still roams the cemetery of New Orleans, or maybe the Bone Reaper is a creature of the night that I created. Legends and truth are often hard to separate, because every legend begins somewhere with something. Every myth has a beginning. Every whispered tale is born from something. And the Bone Reaper, he was created from my own imagination. The Axeman of New Orleans he was born from? He existed, but his name wasn't Silas LaRue. Whatever his name, he was a madman who wielded an axe and rained terror over New Orleans in the early 1900s. You can find his story in our channel after you subscribe, and then click the link in the video description below. Maybe the Bone Reaper really is out there, watching, waiting. And if you are in New Orleans and you hear the sound of metal on stone, run. Tonight, we delve into a mystery that has haunted families and investigators for decades. The disappearance of the Sodder children, a story shrouded in smoke, whispers, and unanswered questions. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in the quiet town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family, made up of George and Jenny Sodder, Italian immigrants who had built a life for themselves in America, and 9 of their 10 children, gathered in their home to celebrate the holiday season. Good food and conversation around the dinner table and a warm fire glowing in the fireplace made for a pleasant evening. Children's laughter and joy filled the house in anticipation of what Christmas morning would bring. As the clock ticked past the younger children's bedtime, Jenny sent them upstairs to bed, while the older ones lingered, enjoying the last moments of Christmas Eve. Around 12:30 a.m., the house fell into a peaceful slumber. However, this tranquility would soon be shattered. A strange phone call rang through the house at around 12:45 a.m. Jenny, still awake, answered. A woman's voice, unfamiliar and eerie, asked for a name Jenny did not recognize. In the background, laughter and clinking glasses echoed. Jenny dismissed it as a prank call and went back to bed, but something felt off. The house was silent, yet she noticed the lights were still on, and the door was strangely unlocked. Shrugging off the unease, she turned everything off and retired for the night. Then, just after 1 a.m., disaster struck. Smoke began to fill the house, and within minutes, flames erupted. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr., managed to escape the inferno. But 5 other children, Maurice, age 14, Martha, age 12, Louis, age 10, Jenny, age 8, and Betty, age 5, were trapped inside. George attempted to re-enter the house, but the flames were too intense. Desperate, he tried to use a ladder that was always kept by the side of the house, only to find it missing. He then attempted to use his trucks to climb back into the burning home, but neither vehicle would start, despite having functioned perfectly the previous day. Combined with failed first calls to alert the fire department, it was as if fate or something more sinister had conspired against them. It only took about 45 minutes for the solder 2-story wood frame home to be reduced to smoldering ruins. But amidst the ashes, an unsettling mystery emerged. No skeletal remains of the missing children were ever found. The fire department, hampered by wartime shortages and a delayed response, arrived at the scene late in the morning on Christmas Day. The official cause of the fire was ruled as faulty wiring, yet the house had recently undergone electrical work, and the Christmas lights had remained on even as the fire raged. Experts claimed that the fire had burned too hot and too long for bones to survive. Yet this contradicted scientific studies and past house fires where remains had always been recoverable. Even small household fires leave behind identifiable bones. How could a fire lasting only 45 minutes completely erase all traces of 5 human bodies? George Sodder owned a trucking company in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Their home was a couple of miles outside of the town, and the family were said to have been well-respected members of the community. However, George Sodder had strong political opinions. It is thought he made some enemies in town. A vocal critic of Mussolini and fascism, he had received threats from other Italian Americans who resented his views. Had someone acted on those threats? The Sodders, devastated from the loss of their children and confused by the fire and police reports, began to suspect that something far more sinister had taken place. They believed someone had deliberately started the fire. The 5 children's death certificates were issued soon after the fire on December 30th. Jenny and George were too distraught to attend their children's funeral on January 2nd. However, the surviving children did, yet there were no bodies to bury that day. In the days following the fire, the missing ladder was found about 75 feet away from its normal spot at the bottom of an embankment. Soon, strange reports began to surface that made the Sodders question if their children had actually perished in the fire. Were the children able to make it out of the house on their own unseen and taken? Or were they taken from the home prior to the fire? Could this be why his trucks wouldn't start and the ladder was missing? And why didn't the phones work when they tried to call the fire department? So many questions with no real answers. A witness claimed to have seen a man cutting the telephone lines leading to the Sodder house before the fire broke out. Another person reported seeing a mysterious vehicle parked near the home late that night. Even more chilling, a local woman later claimed she had seen the missing Sodder children being driven away in a car that very night. The family began to believe the children had actually been abducted before the fire. It was hard to dismiss claims as false when they desperately wanted to find out the truth about their children. A peculiar phone call received by the Sodders weeks before the fire added another layer to the mystery. A man, speaking with a thick accent, had asked George if he would be interested in purchasing life insurance for his children. When George declined, the man reportedly said, "Your house will go up in smoke, and your children will be destroyed." The family had also noticed a strange man watching their home in the days leading up to the fire. When confronted, he vanished. Coincidence or a calculated threat? George and Jenny Sodder refused to believe their children had perished in the flames. Clinging to hope, they erected a billboard along Route 40, displaying photos of the missing children and offering a reward for information. The amount was eventually raised to $5,000. They pursued every lead, hiring private investigators, traveling across the country, and even reaching out to the FBI for help. Years later, a woman swore she had seen the children in a Charleston hotel, accompanied by two unknown men and a woman. In 1967, a letter arrived in the mail. Inside the envelope, they found a photograph of a young man resembling Louis Sauter. On the back of the photo, they found a cryptic message that contained his name. The message, "I love Brother Frankie," and some indecipherable letters and numbers. The family was stunned. Had Louis survived? Was this proof the children had been taken? Despite their efforts, they could never trace the sender. The Sauter case remains one of the most perplexing, unsolved mysteries in American history. The lack of physical evidence, coupled with the suspicious circumstances, has fueled countless theories. George and Jenny spent everything searching and following every lead, no matter how insignificant, trying to find their children. However, their wait was in vain. No real trace of the children was ever found. Some believe the children perished in the fire, their remains destroyed in an inexplicable phenomenon. Others insist they were kidnapped, possibly as part of a human trafficking ring or revenge plot, and taken out of the country. Theories range from organized crime involvement to government cover-ups. In 1969, after years of searching, George Sauter passed away, never knowing the fate of his children. Jenny, until her final days, refused to let go of hope. She kept the porch light on every night, waiting for their return until her passing in 1989. The billboard bearing a family's plea for answers was finally removed after her death. The story of the Sauter children is a chilling reminder of the uncertainties that can haunt us. A Christmas Eve celebration turned into a nightmare, leaving a family shattered and a community in disbelief. The flames that fateful night consumed not only a house, but also the truth, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. What do you think happened to the Sauter children? Were they victims of the fire, or was a darker force at play? If they were alive, why didn't they try to contact their family when they became adults? Let us know your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.